She was one of the last editors who believed journalism could make people better. While others chased outrage and spectacle, she quietly chose stories that healed. But when the machine turned against her, she had to decide, keep her seat at the table, or keep her soul. Every morning, Maggie Ellsworth stepped into the revolving door of the Signal headquarters and passed through a tunnel of televisions, 12 screens, wall-mounted, muted, wars, murders, protests, stocks in free fall, politicians scowling, protesters shouting, women weeping on TikTok, the usual liturgy. She didn't hate it. That would give it too much credit. She just refused to believe that this looping vortex of grievance and spectacle was the only story worth telling. Maggie was the editor-in-chief. She was not out of touch. She used Slack. She ran editorial meetings from an iPad. She wore sneakers that matched her blazer. She had a social media team she didn't micromanage, an AI assistant she spoke to with respect, and 2 cats at home that she didn't talk to unless the matter was of extreme urgency. But she also kept a brass letter opener on her desk. She drank her coffee from a chipped mug that said, "World's okayest boss." And in her top drawer she kept a folder labelled, "Hold for Lighter Day." Inside, profiles of nurses, bus drivers, bridge painters, a retired woman who made hats for preemies. For 3 years, that drawer had barely opened until Tuesday. It started with a headline, Bryce Halperin, junior executive with the jawline of a tennis pro and the vocabulary of a TED Talk, stood in her office doorway holding a printout. The headline was hers, or rather, it had appeared on the homepage under her byline, even though she hadn't approved it. Governor's daughter missing after luxury yacht party. "Great engagement, Maggie," Bryce said, flashing his prepackaged smile. "That one's catching fire." "I didn't approve this," she said, without looking up. "Technically, the overnight editor did. You were offline." "That doesn't make it mine." "But it's working." Bryce stepped in. "You know, I respect your instincts, but numbers don't lie." She looked at him, steady, silent. He filled the silence. "Look, I know you care about tone, but eyeballs keep us alive. And eyeballs want drama. It's the world we live in." Maggie turned back to her screen. "I'll be revising the editorial guidelines," she said calmly, "starting today." In the elevator that evening, she rode alone. Someone had spilled kombucha in the corner. She watched it pool in slow motion. Her phone buzzed. A Slack ping from Bryce. "Just checking in. You sure about this new direction? Happy to workshop it tomorrow." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened the Hold for Lighter Day folder and reread the lead from a story spiked last winter. On Tuesdays, Ms. Lydia Garcia kneels in the subway station with a paintbrush and adds color to people's shoes. She doesn't charge. She says it helps her feel useful. It didn't trend, but it stayed with her. She pressed her forehead to the cool metal of the elevator wall. Not to fight. Just to remember what it felt like to breathe outside the noise. Maggie issued the memo on a Wednesday. Effective immediately, the Signal will dedicate the homepage's top feature slot to stories of reconciliation, restoration, and human dignity. Coverage of violence and scandal will not cease, but it will be placed in context, not on pedestals. We are not here to mirror the darkness. We are here to make people see clearly, and sometimes that means offering them light. She anticipated confusion. She expected complaints. She braced for mockery. She did not expect applause. "About time," muttered Rita from graphics. "I've had this story about a parolee turned sculptor for 6 weeks," whispered Janine from features. "I've got a guy in Tacoma teaching welding to teens who dropped out of school," said Marcus from video. Even the interns looked relieved, like someone had turned down the volume. For a brief moment the newsroom softened. Something in the air changed, a breeze from nowhere. And then came Bryce. He didn't fight her directly, not at first. He let the numbers do the talking. 2 days after the change, the metrics flatlined. Traffic dipped, shares slowed. Advertisers started poking around, wondering if the signal was losing its edge. Bryce dropped hints in meetings, phrases like competitive entropy and brand dilution. He reminded people that legacy institutions didn't always adapt fast enough, that benevolent curation wasn't a viable monetization model. One morning, Maggie opened her inbox to find a message from the CEO's assistant. Coffee this Friday. Casual catch-up. She knew what that meant. Bryce was circling. That Thursday, a story about a viral street fight appeared on the site without her sign-off, blurred faces, shouting match, one punch, then another. Someone's shirt came off. The video auto-played. Maggie clicked pause, then delete. By the time Bryce knocked on her door, she was waiting. Technical glitch, he said, hands raised. A /B testing. Wasn't supposed to go live. You know what this is, she said, and so do I. He smiled the way someone does when they think they've already won. I'm just saying, Maggie, people don't come to us for warm fuzzies. They come to feel something. They'll feel something when we stop trying to incite them and start trying to feed them, she replied. Feed them what? Inspiration? He scoffed. That's not news. That's mood lighting. Maggie stood, not loud, not angry, just done. You want this desk, Bryce? You can have the noise, but you'll have to pry the silence out of my cold, clear-minded hands. That night she stayed late. The newsroom emptied, the screens dimmed. The windows reflected nothing but the city's insomnia. She lit a small desk lamp, the warm kind. She edited 3 stories. A kid who forgave the driver who hit his dog. A hospice nurse who played cello during night shifts. A diner that erased tabs for veterans on Thanksgiving. And she scheduled them to go live at dawn, right above the fold. By the following week, Maggie's decision was all anyone at the Signal could talk about, except nobody talked to her about it. Not directly. Whispers passed like cold coffee in the break room. Is she losing it? Going soft? She's about to get replaced, right? Bryce had become very good at the subtle sabotage, looping in other executives on Slack threads she wasn't in, forwarding data snapshots with strategically bolded metrics, asking probing questions in meetings that implied answers without stating them. The mood turned cautious. Maggie felt it in the silences, the way conversations paused when she entered a room, the way junior staff nodded at her, polite and stiff, like students passing a substitute teacher. She wasn't rattled, but she wasn't blind either. It was the janitor, his name was Howard, who broke the spell. Late Thursday night, as Maggie prepared to leave, she passed Howard buffing the tiles near the elevators. "You're the only one still here," he said. She smiled. "Comes with the title." Howard looked up from his machine. "My wife used to say, when you stop watching the storm and start watching the soil, that's when things grow." Took me 10 years to figure out what she meant. Maggie blinked. She was wise. She was a gardener, Howard said. Died last spring. Cancer. He nodded toward the muted TVs. She couldn't stand those things. Said they made her forget what flowers smelled like. Maggie lingered in the hallway long after he returned to his work. The next morning, something strange happened. The site's analytics dashboard, normally a mess of reds and downward arrows, showed a spike. The cello nurse story had gone viral. A Reddit user had shared it with the caption, "I needed this today." It was picked up by a parenting blog, then a mindfulness coach, then a small-town radio station that played it between segments. Comments poured in, emails too. Messages from readers saying they'd cried, that they'd shown the article to their mother, their daughter, their therapist. Someone started a GoFundMe for the nurse. It passed $40,000 by lunchtime. Bryce didn't say a word. Neither did the CEO. Maggie didn't gloat. She updated the editorial guidelines again, quietly adding a line. When the world howls, we will hum. When the lens narrows, we will widen it. When there is blood in the streets, we will still look for bread. She didn't expect applause, but she did receive a note, folded, left on her desk, no name. Thanks for reminding me that the good isn't gone. Just quiet. I'm trying to listen more. The walls closed in slowly. First came the leaked memo, not hers. A doctored version of her editorial guidelines sent anonymously to an industry blog, stripped of nuance and framed as a directive to bury hard news in favor of happy talk. Then, the anonymous sources, a former intern alleging bias, a senior executive, Bryce obviously, claiming that Maggie had lost perspective and was risking the credibility of the newsroom. And then the panel segment, cable news. Two talking heads with self-satisfied smirks debating whether the signal had gone soft. One of them said a name. Mispronounced it. The chyron below read, Legacy editor pushes kindness agenda, but at what cost? It wasn't rage Maggie felt. Or shame? It was something quieter, like watching a tree you'd planted being dug up while the neighbours applauded the new gravel. At the next board meeting, Bryce made his move. He arrived early, fresh haircut, new tie, portfolio under arm. The presentation was slick, growth projections, brand recalibration strategies, competitive analysis, words like alignment, momentum, and narrative discipline flashed on the slides. When he finished, there was silence. Then the chairman turned to Maggie. Well? She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply stood, placed both hands on the table and said, If this is what people are buying, then I'm not selling. And that was it. No applause, no outbursts, just a long pause. And then someone offered to walk her out. She didn't pack up that day. She left the office with nothing but her coat, a single folder under her arm, and the brass letter opener in her pocket. In the elevator, she stood exactly where the kombucha had once spilled. The floor was clean now, the stain scrubbed away. But she could still see it. By the time she stepped onto the street, her resignation was trending. Hashtags, think pieces, petitions, some mocked her, others lionized her. Maggie ignored them all. A week later, her name reappeared, this time in a Substack link quietly passed around by a few loyal readers. The Light We Choose by Maggie Ellsworth. Real stories, no spectacle, just people doing the hard work of being human. The first piece was about a teenager who taught his grandfather how to play Minecraft while recovering from a stroke. The second was about a bakery that gave free bread every Friday with no questions asked. The third was an essay. Against the noise, readers came, slowly, then steadily. And somewhere, in a conference room full of graphs and grins, Bryce led the Signal back into the limelight, its homepage once again ablaze with catastrophe, betrayal and crisis. Maggie didn't follow the headlines. She didn't need to. She had tomatoes to stake, snapdragons to prune. Her garden wasn't large, but it was enough for her needs, and to share with a few others. The Substack grew, quietly, not viral, not booming, just steady. Real. Like the people she wrote about. She still didn't use emojis, but she did start signing off with her initials, and without noticing it at first, she began talking to her cats a little more. Mostly about the weather, sometimes about the world, always about the light.